Hello and welcome to this ICAEW webinar, Bridging Software for MTD Income Tax in association with 123 Sheets. My name is Lindsay Wicks and I'm a Senior Technical Manager for Tax Policy here at ICAEW. I'll be your facilitator for today's session. ICAEW knows that bridging software is a hot topic for making tax digital, so it's great to have 123 Sheets here today. We very much encourage you to get involved with today's webinar. You can submit questions to us at any time by typing a question to the Q&A widget. We have allowed time at the end of the webinar for questions, so please keep them coming in and remember that you can upvote questions too. Closed captioning is enabled for the webinar, and if you want to turn on this feature, please click on the CC icon on your screen. Please note that these are automatically generated, so may not be 100% accurate. A link to some useful resources will appear in the chat box shortly, and the slides will follow in the post-event email. Our speaker today is Peter Hamilton, a director at 123 Sheets Limited. Peter is a fellow of ICAEW and a chartered tax advisor. He previously ran his own high street practice in Surrey before founding 123 Sheets in 2018. So I'll hand over now to Peter.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Hopefully people will see my screen that's coming up in a moment. Hopefully you can see that now, and I shall begin. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to have a quick look at what HMRC are attempting to achieve with MTD. HMRC keeps its cards close to its chest. This is just a reminder, as you saw on the opening slide earlier from the ICAEW, that this answer that I'm going to provide is neither the published view of HMRC nor the expressed opinion of the ICAEW, but that of myself from 123 Sheets. But I think it's very important because I believe that the information that's out there it is difficult to understand why HMRC is positioning itself how it is and what they're trying to achieve with HMRC with MTD. So I'm going to put forward our views on that. So yeah, we believe that HMRC wishes to tax the self-employed and those that run rental businesses eventually in the same way that employees are taxed now. There's been a big shift in recent decades from employment to self-employment amongst the general public, which for HMRC has created not only a loss of revenue, but also significantly increases the tax gap which they seek to reduce because of the way in which data is collected and tax is paid. So for example, currently now HMRC receives regular data throughout the year and receives regular payments that match the submitted data for employees. HMRC has learned over the decades that only regular payments that match regular submitted data significantly reduces the tax gap. Rather than annual data, annual payments, or payments on account that do not match regular submitted data, we believe HMRC are looking for irregular data with matching payments. Now, rather than look at what HMRC has publicized, I'd like to take a look at what they've actually been doing over the last few decades. Just get my slides to move forward. Okay. Okay, so the broader picture. So self-assessment was started in 1996, where there's annual data and annual payments to match, or payments on account that weren't matched up with what had been submitted until getting on for almost 2 years after the profits had been earned. So the first movement by which HMRC that I can detect, specifically looking at self-employed people and getting them to submit regular data with regular payments to match, is the CIS return system that was then made electronic from that point onwards. And we're obviously dealing here with individual taxpayers who were in the construction industry, where it's well known there was a huge tax gap. And from that point, there was monthly data being submitted with £100 fines if they were not submitted on time, with monthly payments to match. Then in 2013, we had electronic RTI payroll. The problem that HMRC had prior to that was that lots of businesses, although they were running the payroll every month, they weren't having to submit data to HMRC until the end of the tax year. And lots of businesses were taking that opportunity to pay a different amount of tax each month than actually what they were submitting to HMRC, and then doing a big catch-up payment a year later, effectively at the end of the tax year. So with electronic RTI payment for employees, there's now, and has been ever since, monthly data with a monthly payment to match. Then in 2015, MTD was announced, whereby they announced there would be quarterly data and quarterly payments to match that quarterly data submitted to HMRC for the self-employed and property rental businesses. In 2017, MTD then postponed MTD and removed quarterly payments under pressure. And I think part of the reason why they allowed that to go ahead was because they were aware that the data they were going to be obtaining at that point was going to be of a very low quality. However, they have made significant strides in moving the self-employed onto the cash basis in order to get payments to be more realistic to what was being submitted, whereby on the accruals basis, there is no, there would be a need for management accounts on a regular basis to be undertaken, but on the cash basis, that isn't really necessary. In 2018, the Department for Work and Pensions brought live the Universal Credit Full Service for the self-employed. And what that meant is that anybody who was self-employed and wanted to receive universal credits needed to submit, and still are now, submit monthly data. And in return, the taxpayer would receive a monthly payment from HMRC of their universal credit based on that data they had submitted. And what's interesting is that in this system, the taxpayers were having to submit their data within a month of it, and also it was always being done on the cash basis. Then since then, in 2024, 1 year ahead of MTD starting, and I think the reason it's been brought in a year ahead is to eliminate transitional issues that people will have, so that by the time it's then April, well, I mean, I guess maybe 2 years of transition potentially. And then with April 2026 starting, most self-employed people are expected to be on the cash basis. So it's now from April 2024, the default option that self-employed people are put onto the cash basis unless they opt out. And the prior turnover limit that used to be 300,000 has now been completely removed. So any self-employed person of any turnover limit now by default is to use the cash basis. And they've removed obstacles to people using the cash basis, such as interest deduction, not previously being allowed on the cash basis to being allowed. And I think this paints a picture, hopefully, to people of what HMRC has been doing to try to beef up quarterly data and quarterly payments to match. Okay, so what does this tell us? It tells us that MTD is not going away. It tells us that HMRC has been preparing a path for MTD over the last 20 years, and that we should expect regular payments to match regular data. With the Labour government desperate to find more tax without increasing tax, MTD, in my opinion, is unlikely to be postponed again. So, okay, so what do we do then? So tax agents preparing for MTD, they need to obtain an agent services account. I imagine that most accountancy firms already have these, as they are required for MTD VAT. In that agent service account, they will be required to link the clients they have from their agent government gateway account to their agent services account, which is just typically done by pressing of a single button that draws all of their self-assessment and VAT clients into the agent services account. If you have already done that for VAT, it is already live and working for self-assessment, so you wouldn't need to do that a second time. And you'd need to look at client authorizations to bring in clients into your agent services account, which can now be done electronically via the agent services account itself. Each and every client joining MTD will be required to register for MTD, and I would imagine that most clients would expect their accountant to be doing this. There is no way to sort of bulk upload or bulk sign up clients for MTD. Each one must be done separately on the agent services account. or alternatively, the taxpayer can do it themselves from their own government gateway. Yeah, so each client that is joining MTD will be required to use software, as everybody is probably already aware, and that software will need to use the agent services account to authorize the software provider, where the accountant is going to be filing through some sort of tax agent software account. So in 123 Sheets, we have two types of accounts. We have an agent software account, and we have a taxpayer account. So accountants will be signing up mostly for the tax agent account in our software, and in there they would be using their agent services account credentials in order to authorize the software. That will then mean that any clients that they put into our software will automatically be authorized. It only needs to be done about once every 18 months. From a practical point, lots of accountants experience difficulties authorizing clients, and it does happen that sometimes tax agents need to use the client's own government gateway to authorize software and to make submissions. Where that happens, we would recommend that you do not use a tax agent account in the software, because that client, you will not be able to see their affairs. And if you were to then authorize the software so you could see that one client in our software by using the client's government gateway account, it would then remove all the software authorization for every other single client. So if you do have the odd client here or there where you need to be using their government gateway to submit the quarterly data, you'd need to put them on to a separate account, which on our software would be a taxpayer account, to use the taxpayer's government gateway. On our taxpayer accounts, we do accept multiple businesses, multiple taxpayers. So if you had even 100, 200, 300, or however many clients that you might have where you're unable to authorize the software via your agent service account and need to use a government gateway account, you can actually do that from just one taxpayer account with all of the taxpayers in there, each with their own authorization using their gateway account. You also need to consider making calendar quarter elections. A lot of businesses that are VAT registered are going to have a calendar quarter end. So you'd need to, or you don't have to, but it would be a lot more. It would simplify the affairs for the accountant and for the taxpayer if the income tax quarterly submissions are done on a calendar quarter basis, if the VAT returns are already done on that basis. Or an alternative could be if the client's VAT quarters do not coincide with the calendar quarters, to also bring the VAT quarters to match the calendar quarter as well. That will then make it very easy to submit a VAT return and then straight away after an income tax return from within the same software, remaining in the same client. And you'll see how that works on our software shortly. And just a reminder that the first quarterly submissions for MTD that are mandatory are due by the 7th of August 2026. That's when you definitely need to have everything up and running and submitted by. Okay, preparing spreadsheets, digital links. So the digital links regime for self-assessment follow that of the VAT regulations. So this means that digital links are required from the bookkeeping entries onwards. Now, what that means is you may have a lot of data already in an electronic format, but that data does not need to be digitally linked until such times as the data is actually in the bookkeeping. Now, obviously, from a software point of view, you may well prefer to have digital records from the outset. So, for example, you could have an EPOS system for a retail person that's already electronically connected to their bookkeeping, for example. But there's not a requirement for that. So if you do have clients who are a bit more old school, and let's say enter their daily Z readings into their bookkeeping, which might be in a spreadsheet, then that is totally acceptable, even though there is no digital link, because the digital links only begin from when the bookkeeping entries are going forward. Equally, it might be for a rental business whereby there are electronic letting agent statements, and It might be that you might want to connect those letting agent statements straight into or being part of the same software. But if it happens that that's not possible, maybe because of the type of the letting agent doesn't produce digital statements, then it's perfectly acceptable to be entering that data into the bookkeeping manually, as long as you are not entering summary data. It has to be it would have to be data from the monthly statement from the agent. Let's move on. So there are some situations when you are allowed to enter summary data. That might be where you've used summary data to undertake a calculation, for example, calculating monthly interest. You might have used a monthly figure for that instead of all the daily interest rates for each day or added up. But generally speaking, you're not allowed to use summary data to enter into the records for the bookkeeping. Just to go back for a second, so on entering what I mentioned earlier about the monthly statements from the letting agents, it is therefore the individual transactions that are listed on that monthly agent statement, the letting agent statements that would then be needed to be entered into the bookkeeping. So, for example, rent is typically a single transaction for the month. The agent's fee is an invoice once a month. So you've been entering that information that you find on the letting agent statement, not any sort of just total down the bottom. Okay, so digital links, you are allowed to export, upload, download, send email attachments between you and your client, and use Excel formulas. So it's quite a large scope of availability for what's included in digitally linking the data. As you may be aware from following on from VAT, that there is no copying or pasting of totals except for certain schemes. So, for example, there's a retail scheme whereby you are allowed to enter into the bookkeeping the daily Z reading for the day, as opposed to necessarily having to enter in every individual sale that took place on that day. Okay, how do we prepare spreadsheets? And it's useful to know that the spreadsheet, the system given by HMRC for the quarters now, so quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four, are all based on cumulative data. So, for example, quarter three will include all of the data from 1 and 2, as well as quarter three for that period. So, yeah, quarterly year-to-date figures are submitted. And what that means is and HMRC have made this clear in meetings that I've been in. They are not looking for any reconciliations between the quarters. In fact, I remember one software provider putting his hand up and asking about that. And there was a bit of laughter that went round, which I thought was quite surprising. Because obviously accountants particularly love their reconciliations. So each time you are submitting a quarterly set of data to HMRC behind the behind the scenes effectively forgets the previous quarter and the previous quarter becomes irrelevant. I'm sure in reality they are keeping those records, but what we are being told is effectively from the taxpayer's point of view is that those records from one quarter to another, the next quarter totally supersedes the previous quarter in the current tax year. So that means that it's because of the cumulative data, it's easy to have one spreadsheet for the entire tax year. You don't need to be submitting separate totals for all these different quarters. You can sort of use one spreadsheet that just adds on more stuff each quarter as the entries are entered into the spreadsheet. And it also means that we only need one summary worksheet that's pre-digitally linked. Prior to, I mean, you don't have to pre-digitally link your spreadsheet, but it's a good idea to have your spreadsheet all pre-digitally linked before anybody makes any entries, so that automatically using the formulas in the spreadsheet, subtotals and cumulative data totals are going to pre-populate themselves so that you don't need to fiddle around with the spreadsheet each quarter. Therefore, the use of templates will be very useful to minimize digital linking work. I would say more so between quarters. And also, if you've got a good template to work from in one year, and store a copy, a master copy of that empty spreadsheet. You can just use it again each year going forward, unless HMRC change, for example, tax headings or something like that, or the way in which the expenses should be analysed. Then you may need to amend your spreadsheet. But otherwise, you could be using the same master spreadsheet for all of your clients for many years to come without having to worry about constantly linking things in a spreadsheet each time. I'll just very briefly look at why people want to use Excel for MTD. So it provides a huge flexibility compared to off-the-shelf products. So for example, at 123 Sheets, we actually have a FTSE listed 100 company using our software, because their software obviously does not provide all the functionality that they want it to submit VAT returns. A lot of off-the-shelf software are probably, I would imagine, are not going to deal with certain issues very well, or become quite time laboring. So for example, with regards to disallowing certain types of expenditure on an individual basis or on a group basis, and that's going to be quite difficult to deal with. Also, it's useful if clients are already on a spreadsheet. Then they may find it a lot easier to undertake MTD ITSA if they're already on a spreadsheet. There's virtually no additional costs, and they can carry on using spreadsheets, as far as we're aware, indefinitely. Using a spreadsheet also allows people to review and amend client data more quickly in spreadsheets generally. And there are no, for a small micro trader or for small landlords, no chart of accounts generally needs to be prepared. Once you've got, a master spreadsheet to use, in many cases, by the time on some software providers you had invested time in creating a chart of accounts, you could have already finished the bookkeeping in a spreadsheet in that time. Some accountancy firms who have developed their own bookkeeping spreadsheets, often that might use macros, do experience faster data entry in a well-designed spreadsheet using trained staff than a lot of other types of proprietary off-the-shelf software products. Most accountants haven't done that, but some do, and they're going to carry on using those spreadsheets, so they can do so without any trouble. Okay, just have a quick look at the ITSA data submission process. How would that work if you were to use 123 Sheets? And this may well be very similar for many other type of bridging software providers. So either you can carry on using your own or the client spreadsheet, however historically you've been doing that, to use our software. And all you would need to do is to digitally link using a formula in Excel, typically an equal sign in a cell, just to obtain one total from one place and move it to another to our filing template. Or alternatively, you might like our bookkeeping spreadsheet that I'll show you a bit later. You may prefer that to your own, what you're already using. Then you would upload that spreadsheet to our website once it's been prepared, and then submit quarterly data to HMRC. After that quarterly data has been submitted to HMRC 4 times, you are then allowed to file annual adjustments and allowances. So very briefly, what this means is that both the filing adjustments and the allowances do not have a requirement for digital links. So that means that if you get to the end of the tax year and you need to make wholesale changes to some of the data, you can just type in totals into our software. Or alternatively, type in adjustments that may well just be summary data. And equally, that's true of the allowances. So for capital allowances, you can just stick in one figure. So there's that aspect to consider. And once you've done the 4 quarters, you've made any adjustments to the data, and you have told HMRC about any allowances or adjustments, like that might come up, so averaging adjustments and so on, and overlap relief and so on. You have effectively finished off the self-employed or the property rental side of things. And then, so therefore, after that, all you've got left to do is their final tax return, where you are bringing in all of their other income sources, deductions that are not within the quarterly regime, or not really even related to the self-employment or the property, like bank interest, dividends, pension, high income benefit charge, and so forth. So who can make the quarterly submissions? The quarterly submissions can be done either by the clients themselves. A lot of accountants don't want to get involved in the quarterly data. They understand it's very low value. Clients are not going to want to pay a lot of money for this. So a lot of them are looking to get clients to do that themselves. So we've enabled something on our software called a sub-account, which enables accountants to grant access to their client to have a numbed down version of what the accountant can see for them to be making submissions, but the accountant is fully in control of what's being sent and what gets seen by the client. Or alternative, of course, the accountant can make the quarterly submissions. On the file tax return aspect, the last bit, it's worth noting that, in fact, at any point along this chain, you can be using a variety of different pieces of software. So, for example, even when you're submitting quarterly data, so if in the middle of a tax year, the client has moved on to a new software, then obviously when they go to file their next quarter, all the previous quarter's data is effectively overridden and adjusted and included in that new quarter. All of the previous quarterly submissions that have historically been made will be the totals will be available in the new software provided, and equally in the file tax return section. If you were to use 123 sheets just for the quarterly submissions, from our software, the quarterly submissions go to HMRC. And then if you were using a different year-end tax software, in that software, you then press a button and that would download the data from HMRC that had previously been submitted from 123 sheets, and all of the data will be available in that other piece of software. So it's not necessary that you need to be using the same piece of software all the way through. At any point, you can change software or be using two different pieces of software, one to do the tax year end and one to do the quarterly submissions. Okay, yeah. So yeah, let's move on. Okay, so let's have a little look now at software. So just bear with me while I try and organize myself for that. So hopefully you can see this. This is our sort of clients portal here. This is a demo version that we have available that anybody can access without entering any details. It's freely available to go onto our website and have a play with. So this is our tax agent version. So we can see we've got some clients here, and we can see that this particular, these clients we've put in like as part of their name. You don't have to do this. We've just done this so that you can tell what's going to come up. What sort of businesses they have. So here we're going to have a look at Ellie because she's got the most things going on. She's got one self-employment, one UK property, and she's VAT registered. Because she's VAT registered, she also has a VAT button and an income tax button. So yeah, if I have a look at that. So first of all, we're sort of contacting HMRC and drawing down what are those obligations for income tax. As I mentioned before, if you have done a calendar quarter election, which you can make on our software, a button in fact appears here for the first quarter, before the first quarter is filed. But once the first quarter has been filed, you can't change the calendar quarter election. And that's why the button is missing from here, because in this example, the first quarter, if we go to history, has already been submitted. So the first quarter for self-employment for the period ending in July has already been submitted, and equally the one for property as well. So it's not possible to make a calendar quarter election because that first quarter has been submitted. As we can see here, there are 3 self-employments quarters still to file and 3 property ones, as you saw before on the history. The first quarter has already been submitted. On our software, you can go and have a view of what's been submitted. So if we were to do that, for example, you can then view the first quarter's data. You can see when it was submitted and with the HMRC's receipt ID. And then, of course, if you wanted to, you could click on the download button, and that will then produce a PDF file of what you can see on that screen, which you might want to either send to the client or keep in the client folder. And it has all the sort of things you'd expect: the client name, business ID, national insurance number. It's nice to know up the top what the profit is and obviously what period it relates to. So this is the period ending July. And this is just the data and the nice big sort of in bold taxable profit finger down the bottom. and you'll get a similar one for the UK property. So on our system, you can also see the HMRC calculations. So there's every time a submission via MTD is sent to HMRC, they redo a new calculation. But you can trigger your own calculation at any time. So, for example, if HMRC has received new data that's not necessarily to do with MTD, such as new employment information that came in the previous month, or pension information, by clicking that trigger calculation, you will you're effectively asking HMRC to do a new calculation based on other data that's already previously been submitted to HMRC. And as I said, every time you make a quarterly submission, HMRC automatically come up with a new calculation in any case. I mean, I imagine a lot of people aren't going to be too bothered about what they see in here. There's an HMRC year-end estimate, and we have put this is all HMRC's calculations. Then there's an HMRC tax amount as the tax is building up through the year. Then there are some detailed, I mean, I say detailed, it doesn't look too detailed, but HMRC's information that they provide. We don't get to decide what they provide us. We just make available what they have available. And some very basic information about allowances. We don't get a breakdown of what's included in there. For example, typically that will be the person's personal allowance, and it will include other things like capital allowances that may have been filed during the year. So that's the HMRC calculation. So effectively at the moment, we're working along this tab. So there is the to-do first, where we've got the quarters to do. We've got the history section, where we've just viewed, we can also amend. So for example, it may well be that often it does happen, you make a quarterly submission, and then the moment you've pressed that submit button, you just realize there's something missing. So this allows you to make an amended submission before having to wait until the next quarter. You can automatically submit. You can send an amended return whenever you like at any point after having already made one submission prior to that. Then we've looked at the HMRC calculations. Then there's the annual adjustments that we mentioned earlier, whereby once you've submitted all 4 quarters in the year, you're able to adjust the totals, which are not part of the digital linking requirements. So if we would look at the self-employment one, for example, what we've done here is we've enabled the user to decide, do you want to enter final figures for the year, or do you just want to enter the differences? So if there was a difference, so you might say, okay, well, actually the turnover is overstated by £1,000. So you just stick in that there, and then that will update the year for turnover, and that will then affect obviously the profit down the bottom, and then you can then submit that to HMRC. And generally speaking, if you just got one thing that's not right, you might use that. But if you need to make huge whole-scale changes, you're typically going to be effectively redoing the bookkeeping, and you just want to enter in annual figures for the year for a variety of items, which you can do as well. So for example, if the turnover was out by 1,000, then we just this time we're going to reduce that by 1,000 there, and then that will show an adjustment there. In terms of what gets submitted to HMRC, it is actually the adjustments, but we allow the user to decide if they want to enter final figures, in which case we will then calculate the adjustments for you and submit those onto HMRC. And again, you can check the taxable profit. And like all our submissions, you'll be able to see the taxpayer's name, details, to ensure you're not accidentally submitting data for the wrong client. Okay, and then you just submit that data once you're happy with that. Okay, the other annual items is where you are, as I mentioned before, sending capital allowances and various other adjustments that are not part of the annual bookkeeping. You can see those there. As I said, you can have a look at these in your own time by going to our website. Then lastly, there's the Finalize tab. We are still building our finalization product, so there isn't actually anything to see there right now. But if you're just looking to do quarterly submissions and to use other software for year-end purposes, then you may not need to even know what's going on there. Okay, and as I mentioned before, yeah, you can very quickly switch between, oops, that's not working on that page. This is a demo version. We haven't quite put as much emphasis into that as we would have liked. Let me just go back to do, I think it's here where it works. So it should work here. Okay, maybe not. Anyway, right, yeah, this, as I mentioned, this is a demo version. I'm not quite sure why that's not working. Okay, all right, we'll just have to leave that for now. Okay, so the other thing I'd like to quickly show you is what I mentioned before about client what I mentioned very briefly about client sub-accounts. So what that is that's where you want the client to undertake their own quarterly submissions. Now, this might even be that the client has, let's say in Ellie's case, she's got one self-employment and maybe the accountant is taking care of the self-employment, but also they just have a single property which they have to file for. And it might even just be, you know, £5,000-10,000 worth of income a year, but it has to be submitted because they've been brought into the making tax digital regime just by virtue of the fact that their self-employment has already gone over 50,000. And this enables the accountant then to be getting on with the self-employment and worrying about that and leaving the client potentially via their sub-account to just be making the quarterly submissions for the property, for example. So in that scenario, you'd click on create sub-account. And you decide which of these things you want the client to be doing. So, you know, maybe the accountant wants to do that one, but so we're not going to allow the client to have a look at the self-employment things. They can just deal with the UK property and foreign property. And then all you need to do, because their client details are already there, is then just put in like some sort of client email address. I need to put something here, otherwise it will flag up that the email address is not right. And then create a sub-account. When this sub-account is created, if I just take you back to a client again for a moment to show you what the client account will look like. So on the client account, what the client will see is just the to-do and just the history. All of these other items are missing. They do not get to see any of those things. And this is, I think, is a difficulty that accountants are going to have if they allow the taxpayer to go onto some other piece of software that they're not in control of, is that other software providers are going to be showing the client HMRC tax calculations. They're going to be showing them how to make annual adjustments, how to do other annual returns, and in some cases where it's not just bridging software, even complete the tax return by themselves. So what we do is on our client sub accounts, the only things the client can do is to look at what they've got to do for that quarter, submit those quarters, and they can have a look at historic quarters they filed if they want to amend it, and that is it. All of the other aspects inside the client account that the client is filing are not available to them. Just to add that there's a user access here, so you can add in members of staff, add in new members of staff, you can edit a member of staff, and you can decide which client can see which member of staff. You can also dictate which type of account that they have. So if you're a manager, for example, what would happen in that situation is you would say, you know, which standard user they're going to be looking after, or the junior member of staff, so that whichever clients the junior member of staff have, those client accesses are grandfathered into availability for the manager, and equally the partner looking after managers and standard members. And the admin is just a single account for one person that controls the whole account for invoicing purposes and other bits and pieces. Just to mention deadlines very briefly. So on the deadline, each person that logs into the account will have this deadline schedule that comes up. This isn't available to the sub-account holders, to the clients, but the accountant is in control. You can switch between VAT and income tax deadlines. This system will be different for each login for the different members of staff that you have. So each member of staff that you have will see only their clients, what's coming up, what's overdue. And you can also use this to check which ones the client haven't done yet. So you then, you know, you could stick a nudge to the client and say, hey, you know what, I can see you haven't filed that quarter yet from here, with a list of all your clients shown. We do, in fact, from our client sub accounts, we do send out regular emails as well to your clients to obviously to let them know how to use the software. They contact us if they are stuck. They don't have to contact you if they're stuck using the software. Yeah, also we send out reminder emails to all the sub-account owners that they have to be, when they should be filing their next quarterly submissions. We do quite a lot to take care of your clients for you with regards to the software, so they're not coming back to talk to you about quarterly submissions when it's been agreed between you and the client that they would be doing that. Okay, let's very briefly now move on to having a look at doing some submissions. So we go to Ellie. So we're going to do 2 very quick submissions now. So we need to do a self-employment one that was, in fact, it's already overdue. It was due on the 5th. It's for the period ending the 5th of October. So we'll do that self-employment one now. If you recall, we have to look at spreadsheets first. So let's just do that. So here I've got an example spreadsheet. I've made it very basic so you can understand it with not with lots of tabs. So there's some basic sales information. There is some basic purchase information. On the sales information, typically the accountant might want to have a little reconciliation there. They can agree to what's being submitted. So I've got sales and purchases here. In this example, we are saying that this particular trader is below the VAT threshold. Therefore, they are allowed to submit consolidated expenses, which means that they don't need to analyze out all of their purchases into different expense categories. All they need to do is to have one figure for expense that's being submitted each quarter. And so you can see here, I've put them into quarters, and so on the 3rd quarter, all they need to do is just to add in data there or add in data there into the 4th quarter. Now, these sales and purchases here are not designed by us. You know, you will have your own version of sales purchases, or the client will have their own version. The only part of this spreadsheet that's actually from us, if you like, is this ITSA file, whereby we're asking for the totals to be populated into a template worksheet that when you upload the spreadsheet to our website, it will pick up those figures. And if you're setting up the spreadsheet for the beginning of the year, you just go to sales, press an equal sign, go to sales, and then put up the total cumulative sales for the year and press enter, and then do a similar thing here. As you can see here, we could use this for cost of goods, or put all expenses here if using consolidated expenses, which we are. So we put an equal sign there and then pick up the cumulative figure for the year. And the reason why we're picking the cumulative figure for the year up is that we don't need to do remapping later. It's already picking up all of these totals from all of these different quarters, which you can see is happening here. And then I can just, as I mentioned before, do a little reconciliation. Okay, I'm expecting 7646. So I might even write that down for a second. 17646 to go to HMRC as the profit. And that's what I've got here on the 1, 2, 3 sheets template. So we might save that. Okay, that's now ready to go. So all I do now is we're now back on the website and we're going to upload that spreadsheet. Now, you don't need to, so although in that spreadsheet we have included our filing template, you don't have to include it as an additional worksheet. You download the filing template here. It's just a single worksheet. You can keep them separate. And again, just use an equal sign to transpose figures. And then all you'd need to do is just upload that filing template only, that then does not have any data, underlying data within it. Okay, so let's just make that submission. So you click on File. Yep, we're using the default spreadsheet. We're using simplified expenses. And then you can either choose the file or drag and drop it. So in this case, I'm just going to drag and drop it. Let me just find out where the file is. Okay, there it is. And then I just, drag and drop that there, add the file, show the figures. And here we have, oh yeah, there's the 17646 I was expecting. So I'm happy with that. So then I just submit that quarterly data. And that's Q2 that I've submitted there. So you can see how quick and easy that is. Okay, let's look at now how to use the 1, 2, 3 sheet spreadsheet. So for that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back. In fact, just click on clients, go back to Ellie, income tax, and I'll just try that VAT button again, see if that's working. Yeah, there we are, it's working this time. Okay, so you can see how easy it is to switch now between VAT filings and then an income tax filing on this when you're staying on the same client the whole time. Okay, so let's do a UK property submission now. So this time, instead of using a filing template, we're going to have a look at the 123 Sheets bookkeeping file. We have one of these for self-employment. We also have one for property. We're going to be looking at a property one. So this time we're going to be uploading a 123 Sheets PDF file. So let's just go to the bookkeeping very quickly. So here is our spreadsheet bookkeeping file. You can enter in rent information and expenses. If you want to, you can use our agent statement information. And you can also have a look at previous, this is letting agent statements that will then be generated. You can edit that, commit the data, and so forth. And very briefly, in this example here, first of all, when you obtain the spreadsheet, you would update settings. So how complicated or how simple are the affairs in here? So in this scenario, we've said there are multiple beneficial owners. There are 3 of them. We have mentioned that we also want to have property analysis by person as well. So this spreadsheet can track individual properties, even by beneficial owner per property as well. Once you've entered in rental income and expenses, and other entries like capital allowances and so forth, you can then have a quick look if you want to. Okay, what's it looking like for the year? You can update the spreadsheet to say, how is it for Ellie? And then this column here will populate just for her profit. And you can say, actually, I'd like to know how Ellie's doing actually just on number 73. Then the data all updates. This is the total of number 73 now, and that's just Ellie's share of number 73. And you can change the date range. Then there's a ledger report here. You can select all ledgers or individuals. Again, you can arrange this by beneficial owner and equally just by property if you want to. I'll just leave that on all. You can change the date range. We click on the update ledger and it will then populate all the rental income. And you can see on this ownership column here, this is Ellie's share of every single transaction that's in here. So we've got rental income there. And then the other equally for the other expenses, so repairs and maintenance, travel costs, professional fees, residential finance costs. All of these come with a subtotal, so we can see Ellie's share of the total. That's that. In terms of making an income tax submission, what we would do here is when you enter into the spreadsheet the number of beneficial owners, this spreadsheet takes up to 10 beneficial owners and up to 100 properties. We've entered in 3. This is where you'll generate the PDF reports that then you can upload to our website. So first of all, typically you might want to have a look at a detailed report, because before you make the submission for a quarter for Ellie, you want to know what's going to be included. So this will generate a detailed report first. So I'm just waiting for that PDF to pop up and I'll share it with you. Okay, it's coming up now. Okay, so if I share that with you. So first of all, there's a summary sheet. It tells us at the top what the profit is. I might even make a note of that. So it's for the 6326 for this second quarter. And it's got Ellie's share of the totals. This is a summary sheet. And then you've got the individual list here. So rental income, there's a 7055. There's her ownership split of the rental income. And then equally analysis of all the expenditure for you to have a look at, so you know exactly what's going to be included in that quarterly submission before you submit it to HMRC. Once we're happy with that, we can then click on the HMRC file, and what that will do is it will create a PDF file that will be accepted by our website that just includes the summary page only without the following detailed information after that. So I'll just show that to you. That's come up now. Here it is here. And again, we can see, there's the profit that we're expecting, 6236 there. So we'll now go to the website and upload that, and we're expecting 6326. You can see also that it's got the client's name in there. If we did enter the NI, that would be there. This and the period here, this helps you to ensure that you're not uploading the wrong PDF file. You've checked the person's name, you've checked the period, the profit looks right. Okay. So let's just do that now. So we go back to the website. So 123 PDF sheet. And I'm going to drag and drop that. Let me just find that submission. That spreadsheet, the PDF file, I mean. So here it is here. So I'll just drag and drop that now into there. Add the file, show the figures. And here we can see the figures that we had before. And there's the 6236 that we saw in the PDF file. I'm happy with that. And before I submit it, I just check, have I got the right client name? Yes, I've got Ellie. And is it the right period? Yes, it's the second quarter up to the 5th of October. I'm now happy that can go off to HMRC. And that's essentially how that works. Okay, right, let's just go back to the presentation now quickly. So we've had the demonstration. Just to remind you of some additional features that we've got that I don't think other bridging software providers have. Thank you for watching. And I believe there's likely to be some questions now, which maybe I can take.
Yes, thank you for that interesting presentation, Peter.
Okay.
We've got quite a few questions. So there was one about the potential issue with the software not linking with the ASA account, meaning that you might need to use the government gateway credentials, and whether that's a specific issue or a general issue. I haven't heard about it from other software providers, but are you aware that others are experiencing issues, Peter?
So is this a general problem, or is that something I've misled people with from my presentation?
Well, you said that you might need to use the government gateway credentials, the
Okay,
individual
okay.
ones.
Okay, yeah. So what I'm referring to there is that for whatever reason, often because the client themselves are not digitally aware, or there's problems with their home address, that sometimes the code that the accountant needs to authorize that software, or that process of authorization that starts from the agent services account, has got nothing to do with any software provider whatsoever, can have issues. In the authorization is just not working. Maybe the client just simply isn't answering their emails, or it's not going to them for some reason, so they can't authorize it. So it's that sort of aspect whereby the client is, for some reason or another, failing to authorize the tax agent. And in that situation, I remember when I ran an accountancy firm, most of my clients did not have a problem doing the authorization, but there were one or two where you had to frog march them somewhere, almost go into their email account and get it for them. Or in the odd occasion, we ended up having to use the government gateway details of the individual taxpayer just to make the submission. So it's just a practical issue that accountants do face when they're faced with clients that have difficulties authorizing the software, and the agent just simply isn't getting it, but yet there's a deadline to submit that, regardless of what software is being used. So
Yeah,
we have therefore created two different accounts, so that if you do experience that problem, you can purchase an additional taxpayer account on our software to file the submissions using the taxpayer's own government gateway account, which is obviously not ideal, but sometimes that becomes a necessary evil just to get things done.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it links in again to a question that I answered online, but about the when you need to sign people up by, because the hard deadline is in time to submit the first quarter next August, but it's having the time to sort out these issues, because I am seeing people having issues with the taxpayer data, and as you say, things about how the client's address is entered in their account can cause the software to fail, can't it, for whatever reason? So it's giving time to make sure that that data cleanse that is needed can happen.
Yeah, I think it would only cause the software to fail, the software to be a problem when the client is not authorized. So, I mean, it wouldn't be specifically because of the address, but the address obviously is one of the major areas that becomes a problem. But it's all
Yeah.
about, as far as the software is concerned, it is literally, has that client been approved?
Okay.
And if they haven't, then it doesn't matter how many times the user keeps pressing approve, it's not going to work in the software if you haven't authorized that client correctly with HMRC beforehand.
hmm Um, You've obviously shown that 123 Sheets can file the end of year tax return, and that that was the finalised tab. And people have asked when's that finalised going to be ready?
So we are planning to have that ready at some point during the following tax year. So a basic version we're hoping to have ready before the tax year starts. Um, But in terms of making it a lot more comprehensive, because the data we're getting from HMRC is that there's a huge, most people have some extra stuff to put on their tax return rather than just their self-employment or just the property. And I would recommend, and the other thing I would probably mention that I completely understand, there'll be a lot of accountancy firms who are not going to use our year-end process because it is going to be basic. So, for example, software providers that have been making year-end software for many years have all sorts of engines to calculate the capital allowances for you. Whereas our final year submission will basically just have a hole for you to put the number of the capital allowances in that we would have expected you to calculate yourself. In many cases, that's not an issue because for a lot of small businesses, they're mostly just using the annual investment allowance, which is just a number. But if you're looking for something that's more comprehensive, I would say that you probably wouldn't be wanting to use for our tax finalization software. We do feel that our quarterly submission software is up there with the best of them, but or even not above. I would add, but I would say that in terms of our final year end process, we're not going to be as comprehensive as some of the bigger established longer in business players who've been making tax year end software for decades.
Yeah. And people obviously interested in the bookkeeping sheet, and they've asked when that might be available. Do you have a date in mind?
We are still working on them. Yes, they're not available at the moment. As a backstop, they would certainly be ready for the new tax year. They do take a lot of time to. I mean, they've been being designed, in fact, over a number of years before. To get to the point where they are now. The thing that we have to be very, very careful about is that with a spreadsheet, if it's not up to scratch from the get-go, we do not want to be receiving thousands of spreadsheets back in an email saying this doesn't work, whatever. Because with online software, it's not a problem because you can make a fix on the software and it will automatically apply to everybody, but that doesn't work with a spreadsheet. So we are making sure and working with testers that it is really rock solid before we make it available, so we don't get thousands of emails coming in saying the spreadsheet doesn't work here or my client. I mean, we're also trying to make it virtually indestructible because we know clients like to break spreadsheets.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that's often people like to have a go, don't they?
I think maybe
And get
people
rid of
might.
protections and
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Just to add, I imagine that people probably have a question about pricing. I haven't talked
yeah,
about that at all.
yeah.
So just to briefly talk about that, to get an idea of how much it will cost your firm in terms of a basic package where you're just using our filing template. If you were to go there, you just go on the accountants page and scroll down. And there you will see there's a slider and you just move the slider along for how many clients you have. That will enable you to be making quarterly submissions as the tax agent using our filing template. If you wish to purchase our bookkeeping spreadsheet, that will be priced at to the accountant £20 per annum on the spreadsheet, and we are pricing that per client. The sub accounts where you are purchasing an additional account for your client, those will be priced at £20 per client per annum, because we are undertaking a lot of hand holding for your clients to get them to submit those quarterly submissions. I mean, just to give you an idea offhand, so if I were to move the income tax slider along to 25 clients, for example, that you might be filing a quarterly submission for, that's 60 quid a year. And it's worth noticing that anybody that purchases an income tax license now before the 1st of January 2027, it will last until the 30th of January 2027. So, if you buy a license now, it will last until 30th of June 2027, whether you buy it now or you buy it this time, even next year.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably we need to wrap up now. And thank you ever so much, Peter, for answering all those questions and for your clear presentation. And apologies to those of you whose questions we didn't get time to address, and we'll try to follow those up after the webinar. And that brings us to the end of today's webinar. I'd like to thank Peter Hamilton for his insight and advice. I'd also like to Thank you, our listeners, for your time and for your questions. I hope you found this session useful. This webinar has been recorded and we'll send you a link to the on-demand recording tomorrow, along with a link to automatically add this webinar to your CPD record. A short feedback survey will pop up on your screen after the webinar finishes. Please complete this, as your feedback is very important to us and helps us shape our future events. And thank you and goodbye.